So how's it going? And I believe you've had a quite a busy week the last few weeks. How are things going down there? How's your team, by the way?
Yep, the team is doing well. The team is growing. We have been expanding into some different areas, so uh, very happy to see how things are evolving here.
Yeah, yeah. You and I have been doing some things together for quite a while, and it's great to have the opportunity to share some of that experience with people around the world. I think we'll just dive into this, Vishnu. So let me quickly introduce you. Today I have with me Dr. Vishnu Doerga. Vishnu holds a PhD in management, specializing in entrepreneurship, as well as an MBA and engineering qualification. I know you're very well studied, so it's awesome to have you on today. Vishnu's executive chairman at Action Invest Caribbean Inc., an ISO certified training and coaching company. And I believe you've been doing that for quite some time, and we'll talk about some of your experience in that area too. You're also president, chairman, counselor of several business support organizations, including the Georgetown Chamber, Go Invest, Bureau of Standards. You bring 20 years of private sector, very passionate about personal, professional, and organizational development. You pursue this passion via numerous organizations. I think that's really the catalyst for our conversation, why I thought it would be really valuable for us to share some of your experience with the community today. So, um, Vishnu, if you don't mind, I thought we'd start off by just asking the question. You're doing a lot in the Guyana community with business owners and entrepreneurs. What's the one thing that really stands out that you're finding is a common challenge amongst business owners, and what we could spend time talking about for today?
Well, the thing that is really on my mind, and thank you for that introduction, is that in our country in particular, um, and this happens in much of the Caribbean and much of the world that has been colonized in the past. There is almost a struggle between the identity of a country that is now looking at getting into a highly developed state, and the baggage of the past. And in our country, we've gone through some very terrible times, politically and otherwise, that has caused more than the population that resides in our country. We have just about 750,000. There are over 1.5 million Guyanese all across the world, and they would have left our country because of security issues, income levels not being at the right, at a livable wage. And I'm really driven by making sure that businesses do much better, create a lot more employment, and all of that starts with individuals. Individuals really have to understand that they can be better, and really believe in that, and then make those efforts as well. That's where a company like ours, with the coaches on our team, we work with business owners on a daily basis, helping them to get clarity about where they want to go, and then helping to equip them as well on how to actually get there. And by doing that, we have seen many of these companies expand exponentially and create a lot more employment, and pay a lot of taxes as well. That in turn helps the country to do a lot more, and that's really where our passion lies.
And so, is a lot of it to do with their personal growth, or their business growth, or
It is a lot of the first and then even more of the second. I think it's very tough for someone to have fantastic business growth and career growth if their personal life isn't very sorted out. So, although we are business coaches, uh, I notice a lot that in the first couple of weeks, first couple of months, we have to be very focused on helping that person get clarity around their personal life as well. Because it's very tough for people to park their personal life at the door of the organization and pick it up back after work. So we want to make sure that they're in a position that they can actually have good clarity about what's happening in their personal life, have clear goals there as well. And I always ask them, what's more important, you or the business, or you or the organization? And they usually come to the conclusion that it's them. Well, if you are that important, shouldn't you plan for yourself the same way you plan for an organization? Shouldn't you schedule time to do the things for yourself the same way you would do for an organization? And that's usually a good starting point to get them on that path of personal development.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think we both do some similar things, and what you've noticed, just identified again, is people get so busy with
Yeah.
business, and really the quality of implementation is truly affected by them, right?
Yeah.
So having a business plan, and I know the other day you said they need to have a personal plan. Is that still a part of
A
that?
personal
Can
plan.
you expand on that?
A personal plan, a life plan, where do they see their life going? If they're married as well, even being very clear that there's a level of alignment between them and their spouse. If there are kids involved as well, thinking it through to figure out, what's there on the horizon, what are the steps we're thinking about, what's the behavior that we as adults have to display so that our kids and those observing us are able to adopt better behaviors as well that will serve them into the future. So it's very tough to get good results if we're not conscious about the behaviors that really drive these results. And as coaches, that's exactly what we are really good at in terms of making people aware of maybe their current behaviors, and then also where do they want to arrive, because there's a gap between where they are and where they want to get to, and that's where we help them fill that gap.
Yeah, and I think often you probably agree that you can only do that through having the right team around you. But again, the owner's behavior impacts that, right?
Well, in many cases, especially if the business is still fairly small, a lot of the people that are brought onto the team are, in many cases, the reflection of the owner. And if the owner doesn't get very clear on their own filters that they're using in terms of bringing in people, they might bring in a lot of people that are like themselves, and they can start colluding with each other and can have a lot of disadvantages to the organization. But also, if they're not clear on where they're going, how do they build the right team? How do they have people who are focused on, the details in the organization? Who's doing the thinking in the organization? How do people learn? I think coming to that realization of how critical it is for the modern day leader to be able to read and understand people, um, in order to get success. I think that is something that I think with technology advancing so rapidly, it is easy for businesses to disappear if they don't keep up not just with technology but also human behavior, human technology. Do we understand our people the same way we understand our devices? And devices are easy, right? You can press a button and you're almost sure that the computer is going to be on. People don't work that way. Everyone comes with their own user manual, and you do need to kind of figure out how they're put together and how they respond.
Yeah, that whole team dynamics. So you know, getting upset at the team is not the right behavior.
not if you want to, if you want to get upset with the team, then remember that you're also at the same moment getting upset with your own choices because the team is there by your choice. You brought them into the door. I love it when business owners sit across the table from me and then they start telling me about the team this and the team that and the team. And then all I have to ask them is, and you're still paying them? Why? Right? Because if you have to complain that much about the team, it's your choice to have them around, but to also figure out what exactly are you complaining about and what is your responsibility in this. What are you doing or not doing that is causing you to be in the midst of a team that you do not appreciate? Because if you complain about them, it's hard to complain and appreciate at the same time. So it's really putting a mirror in front of their faces.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So, did they take the right effort, the right focus when they were bringing on the team? Did they select them correctly, or did they just go with the old gut instinct and end up with a whole bunch of people that are complementary to themselves? So, everybody ends up looking the same. um, and secondly, if you do get the right people, and I think we've both seen this, is the management style that they are acting out, we call it always behavior and behavior intelligence, is it right for that specific person, or are they using the same approach for everybody? Is that the kind of thing that you're referring to?
Yeah, and especially for people who are still illiterate to understanding the behaviors that play out all around us. You find that happening very often. They're seeking out people very similar to themselves, or people that I even hear the phrase, people we can trust. Um, Sometimes even going into the family or so, and thinking about how do I get people to do the work whilst maintaining a high level of control. And when you run a business like that, it stays pretty small because you can you may not be really focused on bringing in the people that are really required to get the big objectives completed. And some people are not willing to let go of that, let go of some of the need for control, uh, such an extent that they can give people authority to make decisions that move the organization forward. Um, and I also find that the opposite happens. You have people who come from corporate jobs where they had a massive structure with many layers and many people to do work, and they end up in a business. And what happens is that they're very good at creating structure and all of that, but they don't realize the level of activity that needs to take place when you are in a smaller or medium-sized business because you just don't have sufficient people in place as yet. And sometimes being stuck in that corporate mindset can also hold back the level of activity that's needed to drive a growing company.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of that's a really good example because we do see that, especially with recessions and the pandemic and all of these things. The pandemic is just one of them, but there's been lots of recessions where people get to a certain age or salary level that the corporations see them as the most expendable because of the cost factors. So those people leave those organizations and start businesses based on their skill set. But if I'm hearing you correctly, that's fine in a corporate structure. Now it's different in the business, right?
You see, big corporates already have a brand developed. They have a lot of customer loyalty. Their businesses generally running at such a high revenue level, such a high turnover that the inefficiencies that happen within these corporations are easily covered up by their, better than average gross margins. And I think, that for us is a big area as well to focus on. Because if these corporates were running a lot more efficiently, they could be employing more, they could expand much more rapidly, and they could also really make sure that their people, that there are programs for their people that allow them to be more efficient and more effective as well.
Yeah.
Which sometimes it seems lost, seems lost in that big idea that we're a big company, we have our quarterly plan, we have meetings all the time, and we're expecting the result to just flow out of that. But that mindset, people have to be aware of the mindset that takes place in a corporate as opposed to an SME.
Yeah, there's so many things in what you say here. I'm trying to stay focused on one or two of those, but one of the big factors, I guess, in moving into a small business is, as you said, the marketing. You need to understand, what needs to be done in that area. Do they have a product that's available? Do they understand finances? Do you find that that's a big one?
Finances is a big issue in our country, and I understand this happens in many other countries where in our schooling system somehow our students are scarred by mathematics, because in our country math and English are extremely important subjects to such an extent that kids almost get traumatized by the focus on mathematics, and when they grow up to be adults, that fear of mathematics, in my opinion, translates in becoming a fear of money, because what is money but numbers? And if you don't love your numbers, how are you going to manage your numbers? And sometimes one of the breakthroughs that we have to seek first of all is that people understand that numbers are fairly simple. The fear that would have been driven into people at that young age, we need to make sure that we get them to a stage that they actually love their numbers, that they understand with clarity what they're seeking. That it's not just we want to have a better year or we want to make more money. What specifically, and how do we work it out backwards to know what the efforts are that we need to make on a daily basis. A lot of our behavior comes from our exposure as we grew up, and those beliefs do need to be challenged in order to end up with better beliefs or more refined beliefs.
Now, if I'm hearing you correctly, there's a bit of controversy here. What you're really saying is, sorry, I'm going to put words in your mouth here. In the corporate world, we have this focus on your strengths and not your weaknesses. And now, what you just said is, for business, your weaknesses could be your blind spots.
Yeah, definitely, because if people did not have those weaknesses, they would have been much further ahead. So, especially in a business where you may be functioning, you might be wearing multiple hats. How exactly are you going to do that if you don't have a fundamental understanding of the numbers? If you don't have a fundamental understanding of marketing, that you do need to reach out to people who could potentially do business with you. And if you don't have a focus on marketing, how will people know that you exist? You may have the best product or service, but if no noise is made, if people don't get to either experience what you have, taste what you have, be exposed to what you have, it's like you don't exist.
Yeah, so in small business, a leader needs to be able to direct all those different departments as they're building them. They may even have to do them themselves. In a corporate world, we hire people with specific skills and we put them in those specific areas. So knowing that that's their strengths and working to their strengths is really important when you have all the people in their positions in the right place. But for business, you don't have that.
You don't have that, then both areas, of course, have their advantages and disadvantages. And that's where I believe it really depends on the passion of the individual. Some people grow up thinking that I would love to be an employee fitting into an organization and work my way up to that on that ladder.
Mm-hmm.
And there are some other people who say, I really want to be able to do this for myself on my own. So people go into divergent paths, and every so often they flip across. So if someone who is employed goes back into full-time employment, people who are employed elsewhere may want to test out some entrepreneurship. And I think once people have kind of tasted both areas, or they have figured out what they really want to do long term, then I really advise that they take the time to look at what's the type of knowledge, what are the type of skills, the type of abilities that they need to actually develop, that they need to master in order to perform well, either if they're employed or if they are in entrepreneurship. Every single area requires you to be good at that area that you've chosen in order to really get the results that you're looking for.
Yeah, so I guess the next question is, what's the common denominator across everything? Rhetorical question.
Oxygen.
It's people, right?
And oxygen. People don't live without oxygen because everyone you meet, has is wired just a little bit differently. Mm-hmm. In some cases, massively differently. And having being literate about these differences in people does help you make much better decisions.
So can I start a small business by just going out and hiring people for different roles in the company?
Well, you can if you want to, but is that the best path? If I were to start all over again, I would want to make sure that I map out clearly where I want to arrive, and then work out, well, who is the team that I actually need, and then hire accordingly. And of course, use some tools. Active is one that does come to mind that will allow me to understand, well, does this portion really suit this specific role? And even if they are already working with me, to also understand and have them get a better understanding of their own behaviors, so that they can choose what works for them, what's helping them, but they can also see what may be hurting them, and they can make a decision on the steps they want to take in order to address those areas of improvement. And by doing so, me as a business owner, I'll end up in an organization that I'm working with adults, so I don't have to step into the role of the parent, having to direct how my children, how my employees need to behave. I can treat them like adults because they're aware of their own behavior, they're aware of their own intent, and they can make decisions as well, which they will learn from. In some cases, they may not be the best decisions, but adults are able to review the outcome of their decisions and make better decisions in the future.
So I just want to summarize a little bit of that because I have a question in that. So if you can select the right people using the right tools and put those people in place, then it's much easier to lead them. You don't have to manage them, basically, right? The question for me is, how do you know what the criteria for that role is? If you've never learned it, you've never tried it, like you were talking about finance earlier. If you're afraid of money, how do you know that the person you're going to be hiring, what criteria you need to look for? You don't really know how to do that, or you don't like that yourself. Can you actually do that?
Well, the image that comes to my mind is someone almost neck deep in water, um, heading into even deeper water, and they need a lifeline, and they can either ask for the lifeline, someone can spot it and offer a lifeline to them. But that's not always common, right? There's not always common that someone is walking along the shoreline with lifelines ready to just hand out. So my suggestion is that persons in those situations, you've grown and you now start realizing that you're getting to the limits of your own abilities, that you seek that support as hardly as possible, um, because you could end up in a situation where the mistakes you make or the choices you make could end up costing your entire business.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas bringing in an expert in a specific field or bringing in a coach, bringing in a mentor will allow you to gain massively from their experience, their expertise, their skills in the process of helping someone get clarity in their life. And in some cases, it could be free. You could find someone who may be willing to help you at no cost. In many cases, it could be paid as well, where people who are professionals in this field are selling a service where you're expected to get a return on your investment in that specific service. So, different ways in which you can go about it. I usually look at it this way, and I sometimes tell my clients as well. The more you pay, the more you pay attention. Um, because in some cases, I'm sure it may have happened to you as well, where you've given really good advice for free and nothing happened. And when you give the really good advice and it's paid for, there's a lot more action happening. So I find that there is a lot of merit in getting paid support. And that's a bias. I provide paid support, so I must acknowledge it, but I also pay for support.
Right.
And I know the results I get from my paid support. And I know that it works for me. I know it works for my clients. And that's something that I want people to be conscious of, because um, there's an abundance of free advice. Google is probably a good place to get some free advice. But if that is all it took, if Google was all it took, we would all be billionaires right now, with six packs, living next to the beach.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's really interesting. I'm sure you've seen it, and I've seen it as well. In business owners, identify a gap in their business, and they go and hire somebody, thinking they've hired the right person to fill that gap, only to then discover down the road that that person doesn't really know their job very well and isn't moving the company forward, has become an expense rather than an asset. The business owner doesn't know what the role should be, so they've hired someone to fill that role thinking that I've done the right thing, but it backfires. So reaching out to, as you say, the expert community that can provide you with some of that input to alleviate that expense. How much is that costing a business owner when, as you say, if they paid for it, they get much better results sooner.
Yeah, well, the saying that comes to mind is penny wise and pound foolish. So we have to be careful that we're not saving pennies and giving up pounds. And the same way technology has become ever more pervasive, the people who are applying for our jobs as well are probably also paying someone to really dress up their CV very nicely. So when that CV hits the business owner, it could make a massive impact. some candidates, spend hours, days, or even weeks preparing for that interview. Right? It's almost like a bride preparing for the wedding, when really what we want is not just the interview to go well, we want their career and their job and their performance in the organization to go well, much like I believe the bride would actually want her marriage to go well. But unfortunately, people do know, candidates out there do know that the first step is getting past the interview. And if the business owner doesn't have the support and isn't really trained in screening and bringing in the right people, they may actually fall victim to very nicely dressed up CVs and very well rehearsed interviewing skills.
So they need to know or have access to resources to define the role well so that they know what they're looking for. You mentioned Acumatch is a great tool for getting inside people's heads so you know if they can do that at a neurological level. And then after you hire them, what are the monitors, the KPIs, that you look for that tell you, like, the gauge of a car that tell you ahead of time if you're running out of fuel or if your engine's not running properly and it's going to blow up, right? KPIs are a similar thing that they need to put in place with each role so that they know what's going on. Very interesting.
Yeah. It really depends on where do they want to arrive with the business, and then break it down to the role level. What does this person actually need to contribute in order for us to hit the bigger numbers? And again, that I learned that 5 years into my business, and when I learned that, that really made a big difference because it allowed me to see who the contributors were in my organization and who really did not contribute to us hitting our goals. I'm always a proponent that earlier business owners can realize that there are better ways to do things, faster way to do things, the better it is for them.
Yeah. Look, I'm conscious of time, but I do have one more question related to that, and that's the micromanagement resistance that we often hear. Have you come across that where people don't want all the KPIs in place because they feel like they're going to be used to micromanage them?
Yeah, that is somewhat of a common occurrence, especially if they come from organizations where it was very laissez-faire. So people did what they wanted to do, and if they end up in an organization that is very well mapped out with exactly what is required, as maybe even if they are an ISO certified company, companies like that already have their systems for delivering their product or service, and everything is closely measured. It depends on the individual, what are their values, what do they appreciate, and are they truly there to actually move the organization forward, or is it more for them to just get the payslip, the paycheck at the end of the month and keep going month to month? We need better influencers, better exposure, maybe even at the parental level, to make sure that people understand that in life, you can only get out of life what you put in. And if you put in very little, if you're willing to invest very little as an employer or an employee, don't expect too much back out of it. And I think that's something that, with this stage of instant gratification, people want the best of the world without putting in the best of the world effort. And it's easy, for marketers, it's easy to keep playing on people's minds. You need the new watch, you need the new car, you need the new, barbecue grill. So playing on people's minds, and then they in turn then respond to that, react to that, wanting those things without thinking about, a year, 5 years down the line, and what would have actually been a better investment of their time, energy, and money.
Well, I think there's another whole topic for us to talk about. Would love to have you back the whole question of if you're not measuring it, you can't improve it. And that brings us into the ISO stuff that you're doing, Lean, Six Sigma. Every business should run as if it's a manufacturing plant with all of those thoughts in place. So I think there's a really nice follow-up conversation to have for next time. But Vishnu, Dr. Doerga, thank you so much for joining me today, and really appreciate your insights, and good luck with all those ventures. It's very exciting to watch what you're doing.
Thank you very much, Nagy. Thanks for the opportunity, and I love being able to share this knowledge. And I encourage everyone out there who is listening to this or viewing the video to take a moment, think about their own destination, and see how clear your path to that destination is. And if it's not that clear, reach out, get professional help within your community or in the wider community. Thank you very much, Nagy, for having me.
Awesome. Thanks. See you later.